In the autumn of 1984, a company that had been farming America for 150 years ran out of money. Not slowly, not quietly, all at once. International Harvester, the company built from Cyrus McCormick's Reaper, the machine that had put food on the American table since before the Civil War, posted losses of $1.6 billion in 4 years. Its agricultural equipment division, the largest in the United States, went on the auction block in November of that year. The buyer was J.I. Case. The price was $430 million. The name International Harvester, as a farm equipment company, ceased to exist before Christmas. A decade earlier, International Harvester had been the second largest farm equipment manufacturer on Earth. Its combine harvesters cut American wheat from the Dakotas to the Texas Panhandle. Its tractors, red, heavy, engineered for the American Corn Belt, sat in the equipment sheds of 200,000 American farms. Its dealer network covered every agricultural county in the continental United States. By November 1984, it was selling that network, those machines, and those dealers for less than the cost of a single new automotive assembly plant. But the real story of Case IH is not the sale of 1984. It is the story of two American farm equipment dynasties, each more than a century old, each carrying the weight of American agricultural history, forced together by a financial crisis that neither created, running a surviving brand through a farm economy in freefall, and rebuilding something that still, today, harvests American grain from the same ground their founders first turned. Every week, this channel tells the stories of the American machine companies that built something essential, and what the market did to them. Like the video, and subscribe if that history belongs in your library. This story begins not in a boardroom, but in a field, in Racine, Wisconsin in 1842. Jerome Increase Case was 22 years old when he arrived in Rochester, Wisconsin in 1842 with the 6 threshing machines he had purchased on credit in western New York. He sold 5. He kept 1. He used it to thresh grain for neighboring farms for hire. What he found, working that machine across Wisconsin fields in the harvest season of 1842, was that the design was wrong. It was imprecise, prone to clogging, and built for eastern soils that were nothing like the heavy, wet river-bottom ground of the Wisconsin prairie. He spent the winter improving it. He sold the improved version the following season. By 1844, he had moved to Racine, set up a small factory on the banks of the Root River, and begun manufacturing threshing machines to his own design. The J.I. Case Threshing Machine Company was formally incorporated in 1863. Jerome Case's machines were not complicated instruments. They were working tools, engineered for the specific conditions of the American Midwest, sold directly to the farmers who needed them, serviced by mechanics who understood both the machine and the ground it worked. The threshing machine, a machine that separates grain kernels from their stalks and husks, was the harvest technology that made large-scale prairie agriculture possible. Before it, American grain harvest was done by hand with cradle scythes, a process that required 30 man-hours to harvest a single acre of wheat. A Case thresher, horse-powered, cut that to under 2 hours. The American prairie did not become a breadbasket through soil alone. It became a breadbasket because of what Jerome Case built in Racine. By 1880, the J.I. Case Threshing Machine Company was the largest thresher manufacturer in the world. Its machines harvested American grain from Ohio to Nebraska. A Case thresher's appearance at the edge of a Midwestern county fair was enough to draw a crowd. The company's logo, Old Abe, the bald eagle that had served with the 8th Wisconsin Infantry in the Civil War, became one of the most recognizable commercial symbols in rural America. The second thread of this story begins earlier and ends differently. Cyrus Hall McCormick invented the mechanical reaper in 1831 on a Virginia farm. He moved to Chicago in 1847 and opened the McCormick Reaper Works on the north bank of the Chicago River. The reaper, a horse-drawn machine that cut standing grain and laid it in a row for collection, did for American wheat what Case's thresher would do for the crop once cut. McCormick's machines spread across the American Midwest through a distribution network that McCormick built himself. Factory direct agents in every county with written warranties and guaranteed parts availability. It was the first national farm equipment sales and service organization in American history. In 1902, J.P. Morgan merged 5 competing farm implement companies: McCormick Harvesting Machine, Deering Harvester, Milwaukee Harvester, Piano Manufacturing, and Champion, into the International Harvester Company, capitalized at $120 million. The new company controlled 85% of the American grain harvester market on the day it opened. Its Chicago headquarters, its manufacturing complex in Chicago's West Pullman neighborhood, and its tractor plants in Rock Island, Illinois, and Louisville. Kentucky made International Harvester the dominant force in American agricultural equipment for the next 80 years. By the late 1940s, International Harvester was not merely a farm equipment company. It employed more than 100,000 Americans. It built school buses, refrigerators, trucks, and construction equipment in addition to tractors and combines. Its Farmall tractor, introduced in 1923, a general-purpose row crop machine designed to cultivate between corn rows, had become the most widely used farm tractor in the United States. The name Farmall was, to millions of American farm families, not a brand name, it was a synonym for tractor. J.I. Case, still based in Racine, had grown by a different path. The company had moved into steam-powered traction engines in the 1870s, automobiles briefly in the 1900s, and then pivoted hard into the American construction equipment market in the 1950s, acquiring the American Tractor Corporation and building the Case W Series wheel loaders and 580 backhoe loaders that became standards on every American highway and building construction site. By 1967, Case had been acquired by Tenneco, the Houston-based energy and industrial conglomerate, which provided the financial muscle Case lacked as a standalone manufacturer. Two American companies, one founded by a young man with 6 machines and a Wisconsin winter, one assembled by a Wall Street banker from 5 competing firms into an industrial trust, one that had chosen construction and diversification, one that had chosen agricultural dominance and nothing else. By 1984, the diversified company would buy what remained of the dominant one, not from strength, but because the alternative was watching it liquidated for scrap. The machine that defined what the combined company would become had been built not by Case and not by International Harvester's management, but by a small team of IH engineers working in a Hinsdale, Illinois development facility in the mid-1960s, against the institutional preference of nearly everyone above them. The problem was the combine, specifically the conventional combine. A conventional combine, the type that had harvested American grain since the 1930s, used a cylinder and concave threshing system in which grain stalks were fed across a spinning cylinder that knocked the kernels loose, followed by a series of shaking sieves that separated grain from straw. The system worked. It had worked for 50 years. It also had a fundamental constraint. It was sensitive to ground speed, crop conditions, and moisture content in ways that required a skilled operator to manage continuously. Push a conventional combine too hard in tough, wet, or tangled crop, and it would plug, jam solid, stopping production entirely while the operator cleared the machine by hand. A plugged combine in a wet October harvest was not an inconvenience. It was money standing still in a field that could turn to mud overnight. A team of IH engineers, led by a development group in Hinsdale, believed the answer was a different threshing architecture entirely. Instead of the conventional cylinder, they proposed a single large rotating rotor running the full length of the combine body. Grain and straw would spiral through the machine helically, wrapping around the rotor continuously rather than being struck once and sieved. The result would be a machine that could process more material per hour in tougher conditions, with less sensitivity to operator skill and with fewer moving parts to maintain. The IH Axial Flow 1460 Combine, the first production machine using this architecture, was introduced to the American farm market in 1977. Its rotor measured 22 inches in diameter and ran at 450 revolutions per minute. It could harvest corn at field speeds that a conventional combine of the same horsepower class could not match without plugging. In wheat, it delivered cleaner grain at higher throughput. In soybeans, it reduced cracking, the damage to the seed that reduced market-grade value, by a margin that American elevator operators noticed immediately on the scale ticket. The 1460 listed at approximately $68,000 in 1977, roughly $340,000 in current value. John Deere's competing 6600 series conventional combine listed at $52,000. The $16,000 premium represented a significant financial commitment for an American farm operation running on margins already compressed by fuel costs, land debt, and commodity price volatility. But the operators who ran the IH Axial Flow in the 1977 and 1978 harvest seasons came back the following spring and told their neighbors what it had done in tough corn. By 1980, the Axial Flow rotor combine was the fastest-selling combine design in the American market. It had done in 3 seasons what no amount of marketing could achieve. It had produced results visible on the scale ticket of every elevator in the Illinois and Indiana Corn Belt. The IH Axial Flow combine was not merely a product. It was an architectural breakthrough, a fundamental rethinking of how a machine processes grain, at a time when International Harvester, as a corporation, was making almost every other decision incorrectly. The engineering team that built it had, in effect, handed the company a machine that would outlast the company itself. That machine, rebranded in Case IH red and black after the 1984 merger, continuously developed through the 1980s and 1990s and 2000s, is still the dominant combine architecture in American production agriculture. The rotor that those Hinsdale engineers designed is still turning. The company that built it no longer exists. The technology survived everything. The story of International Harvester, at its American peak, is a story of scale that is almost impossible to communicate to anyone who did not grow up inside it. By 1966, International Harvester employed 106,000 Americans across manufacturing facilities in Chicago, Rock Island, Louisville, Fort Wayne, Indianapolis, Springfield, Ohio, and Memphis. Its tractor plant in Louisville, the largest farm tractor manufacturing facility in the United States, produced more than 60,000 tractors annually. Its truck division built the Scout, the Travelall, and the line of IH medium and heavy trucks that served American agriculture, construction, and the interstate freight system simultaneously. Its construction equipment division competed directly with Caterpillar on the crawler tractor and motor grader market. The Farm Bureau in every Midwestern state stocked IH red parts in its co-op warehouses. Every county agent in the Corn Belt knew the IH dealer network by name. The McCormick name, still carried on certain IH equipment lines well into the 1960s, represented an unbroken chain of American agricultural history stretching back to a Virginia farm in 1831. In the American Defense Industrial Base, International Harvester built the M548 cargo carrier, the M113 armored personnel carrier power pack components, and military truck variants that served the United States Army from Korea through Vietnam. Its Fort Wayne, Indiana engine plant produced diesel power units that went into both agricultural and military applications under the same roof, on the same line, with the same American machinists running the same boring mills. The United States Department of Agriculture's statistical records for the 1965 crop year show that IH combines harvested approximately 35% of the American corn crop and 28% of the American wheat crop. Those are not market share numbers, those are food supply numbers. Those are the percentage of American calories that rode through an IH machine on the way from the field to the elevator. The J.I. Case Company, while smaller, had built its own indispensable position. The Case 1030 tractor, introduced in 1965, rated at 102 drawbar horsepower, the pull measured at the rear hitch point that determines what a tractor can actually drag through a field, was the machine that opened the era of true high-horsepower row crop farming on the American prairie. The Case Construction Equipment Division's 580 backhoe loader had become the standard machine on every American road and utility construction project by the late 1960s. In 1974, there were more Case 580s working American construction sites than any other backhoe loader from any manufacturer, domestic or foreign. The cultural peak of this story belongs to the American Corn Belt in the autumn of 1978. The harvest that year followed 2 consecutive years of record production. Corn prices had fallen to $2.10 per bushel. Fuel costs had doubled since 1973. American farm operators were running at margins that required every bushel to be harvested efficiently, cleanly, and quickly before the October rains came and turned fields to standing water. The IH Axial Flow 1460 had its first full-scale American commercial season that autumn. In the high-yield, high-moisture corn of central Illinois, the worst conditions a conventional combine faced, the 1460 demonstrated field capacities that experienced combine operators had not seen before. At Brian Troxell's operation outside of Kankakee, Illinois, the machine harvested 47 acres of 200-bushel corn in a single day. The county average for a conventional combine of comparable horsepower in the same crop was 28 acres. The difference was not operator skill, it was the rotor. American Agriculturalist magazine ran the field capacity comparison in its December 1978 issue. The numbers traveled through every American Farm Bureau coffee counter between Ohio and Nebraska that winter. When John Deere introduced its own rotary combine, the 6620 with Titan rotor system, in 1979, it was a direct response to what IH had demonstrated in the 1978 harvest. The architecture IH had pioneered had become the reference standard against which the dominant American farm equipment company measured its own product development. The stake sentence of this script is this. In the autumn of 1979, in a harvesting operation outside of Ames, Iowa, a single IH 1460 harvested a field of high-moisture corn, 28.5% moisture, far above the 20% threshold at which a conventional combine would have required multiple slow passes or caused unacceptable grain damage, without plugging, without reducing ground speed, and without interruption for a 12-hour day. At the end of that day, the Iowa State University Extension Office estimated that the same field harvested by conventional equipment would have required 2 machines and produced 8% more broken and damaged grain. Damaged grain docked at the elevator. Damaged grain was money not deposited. The axial flow in that field on that day was not merely faster. It was the difference between a profitable harvest and a marginal one. For an American farm operation carrying $400,000 in land debt at 18% interest, the going farm credit rate in Iowa in 1979, the difference between a profitable harvest and a marginal one was the difference between making the note and not making the note. The axial flow combine earned its place in American agriculture not through advertising. It earned it through arithmetic. International Harvester's collapse was not caused by bad engineering. The engineers, as the axial flow rotor had demonstrated, were among the best in the American farm equipment industry. It was caused by 3 simultaneous crises arriving in the same 3-year window, any one of which a well-managed company might have survived, and none of which IH, structured as it was, could absorb together. The first was labor. On November 1, 1979, UAW Local 6 and its affiliated locals struck International Harvester. The dispute was over wages, benefits, and working conditions. The strike lasted 172 days, the longest in the company's history, and one of the longest American industrial strikes of the post-war era. When it ended in April 1980, International Harvester had lost production equivalent to $500 million in inventory. Its dealer network, unable to fill orders during the strike, had watched customers drive to John Deere and Alice Chalmers' showrooms and sign purchase orders for machines that were available for immediate delivery. Some of those customers did not come back. The second was interest rates. The Federal Reserve's inflation-fighting campaign of 1979-1981 drove American prime lending rates to 21.5% by June of 1981. American farm operators who had borrowed heavily through the 1970s land boom, when grain prices were high, land values were rising, and every agricultural lender in the country was extending credit on the assumption that commodity prices would remain elevated, found themselves carrying fixed-cost debt at variable rates that had tripled in 18 months. Equipment purchases stopped, replacement cycles extended from 3 years to 7. Dealers who had financed their inventories on floor plan financing, short-term credit lines used to stock dealer lots, paid off when machines sold, stopped ordering new equipment because they could not service the interest on machines already sitting on their lots. Floor plan financing, the short-term credit arrangement under which an equipment dealer borrows money to stock inventory, repaying the loan when each unit sells. When farm customers stop buying, the floor plan interest accumulates against machines that are not moving. In 1981 and 1982, American farm equipment dealers were paying 20% annually on inventory that was not turning. Dealerships that had been profitable IH outlets for 30 years began to close. International Harvester, which carried both a dealer finance operation and a captive agricultural lending arm, absorbed losses on both sides simultaneously. By fiscal year 1981, the company reported a net loss of $393 million. In 1982, the loss was $1.6 billion. The company sold its solar turbines division. It sold its construction equipment business to Dresser Industries. It sold its truck manufacturing, which became Navistar, as a separate entity. What remained was the agricultural equipment business, the thing the company had been built from, the thing the McCormick Reaper had made possible. By 1984, even that was for sale. John Deere had survived the same farm credit crisis by a combination of financial discipline and product timing that IH had not matched. Deere had introduced the SoundGuard body, an enclosed, insulated, air-conditioned tractor cab that transformed the American farm operator's workday. In 1972, 4 years before IH offered a comparable cab on its 86 series tractors. Deere's financial arm had maintained tighter credit underwriting standards than IH's agricultural lending operation. Deere had entered the 1979 strike year with lower dealer inventory levels and stronger distributor relationships. None of this made Deere responsible for IH's collapse. It made Deere the beneficiary of it. Tenneco, Case's parent company, saw the IH agricultural division auction as a strategic opportunity. Acquiring the IH agricultural assets, the brand, the dealer network, the product lines including the axial flow combine, would make the combined Case IH entity the second largest farm equipment manufacturer in the United States behind John Deere and ahead of every foreign competitor. The purchase price of $430 million was, by any measure of the assets being acquired, a fraction of their replacement cost. The merger announcement landed in November 1984. The brand became Case IH. The colors, Case's power red against IH's red with the added black accent, were set. The dealer consolidation began immediately. That consolidation was brutal. The combined dealer network contained redundant outlets in nearly every American agricultural county. Where IH had a dealer in Champaign, Illinois, Case often had a dealer in the same county. The combined entity could not support both. In the 18 months following the merger, Case IH reduced its North American dealer count from approximately 3,500 to under 2,500. In small rural communities where the IH dealer had been a fixture since the 1920s, the closing of a dealership was not a business story, it was a community loss. The farm crisis did not improve. In 1985 and 1986, American farmland values fell 30 to 50% across the corn and wheat belts. The USDA reported that farm debt-to-asset ratios reached their highest point since the 1930s. Equipment repossessions flooded dealer auction lots. The auctioneers at Hilco Industrial and their regional competitors ran farm dispersal sales every week in Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana. Equipment that had sold for $85,000 in 1981 brought $22,000 at liquidation in 1985. The last IH-branded tractor came off the line at the Louisville plant in 1985. The last IH dealer sign came down in a small town in central Iowa that same winter. The name International Harvester on farm equipment was gone. What remained was a question. Could the company that Case IH had become survive the same farm credit crisis that had destroyed the company it had just acquired? The answer, arrived at slowly and not without additional pain, was yes. The Case IH Magnum Tractor Series, introduced in 1988, rated from 195 to 235 horsepower, designed on a new platform that incorporated the best engineering from both the Case and IH lineages, was the product that demonstrated the merger had produced something more than a consolidation of surviving assets. The Magnum's power-shift transmission, a transmission that allows gear changes under full load without releasing the clutch, maintaining uninterrupted power to the drawbar through the shift, gave American Corn Belt operators a capability that John Deere's competing series could not yet match at the same price point. The Magnum won the American Society of Agricultural and Biological Engineers Outstanding Innovation Award in 1988. More importantly, it sold. American farmers who had watched the IH brand disappear from the dealership sign outside bought the machine because it worked, not because of what it said on the hood. In 1986, Case IH acquired Steiger Tractor of Fargo, North Dakota, the American manufacturer of four-wheel drive articulated tractors, the large frame machines used for primary tillage operations on the flat, high-acreage farms of the northern plains. The Steiger Panther and Cougar series, rebadged in Case IH colors as the 9100 series, added a product line that neither Case nor IH had been able to build competitively at volume. The acquisition made Case IH the only American farm equipment manufacturer with a credible offering from 60 horsepower to 375 horsepower in its own branded lineup. The axial flow combine line continued development throughout the late 1980s and 1990s. By 1995, the 2100 series, with an updated rotor, improved cleaning shoe being the set of adjustable sieves that separate grain from chaff and fine debris after threshing, and computerized yield monitoring, was delivering harvest data that American farm operators had never had access to before. Yield monitoring, a sensor system that continuously measures grain flow through the elevator and maps yield variation across the field, allowing the operator to see, in real time, which parts of a field are producing 180 bushels per acre and which are producing 140 and why. That technology, precision agriculture, as it would be named by the early 1990s, became the competitive arena on which Case IH rebuilt its position in American agriculture, not against foreign competition, but against John Deere, the one domestic competitor that had emerged from the 1980s farm crisis financially intact. Tenneco sold its interest in Case Corporation in 1994, taking the company public. Case IH, as a brand within Case Corporation, passed into the ownership structure that would eventually become CNH Industrial, a merger of Case Corporation and New Holland, completed in 1999 under the Fiat Industrial umbrella. CNH Industrial is today headquartered in the United Kingdom and listed on the New York Stock Exchange. Its Racine, Wisconsin facility still manufactures Case IH equipment. The ownership is multinational. The manufacturing, in part, remains American. The American user community for Case IH is not a collector community. It is a working community. There is no museum circuit for machines that are still being used in commercial production. The surviving red Farmall M tractors from the 1940s and 1950s appear at antique tractor pulls and county fair parades across the Midwest, restored by the sons and grandsons of the men who first ran them, maintained by the same independent mechanics who have kept American farm equipment running since before Case and IH merged into the same company. On Practical Machinist forums and on the Red Power magazine community, the primary American collector and enthusiast network for IH and Case IH equipment, the conversation is not about what was lost in 1984, it is about what parts are still available, which axial flow rotor bearings interchange across model years, and which machine to buy if you are a small acreage operator who wants something that will run for 30 years without a dealer-only diagnostic terminal. The machines that were built to last have lasted. The 1460 combines from 1977 and 1978 still appear on Iron Planet and Purple Wave auction listings, bid to between $8,000 and $18,000 by small grain operators who understand what the machine was designed to do and trust the design more than they trust a current generation machine they cannot repair themselves. These are not nostalgic purchases. They are agricultural infrastructure decisions made by people who know exactly what they are buying and why. The surprise footnote of this story is this: the axial flow rotor combine architecture that IH engineers developed in Hinsdale, Illinois in the 1960s, and that IH used as a competitive differentiator against John Deere in the late 1970s, is now the dominant combine architecture used by every major combine manufacturer on Earth. John Deere adopted a rotary threshing system. CLAs of Germany adopted it. CNH's New Holland brand adopted it. The architectural concept that International Harvester brought to the American market in 1977, developed by a team whose parent company would be sold within 7 years of the machine's introduction, restructured the global harvest equipment industry permanently. The company did not survive the decade that followed its greatest engineering achievement. The engineering achievement is still running in fields on every inhabited continent. What the Case IH story reveals about American agricultural equipment manufacturing is this: scale and heritage by themselves do not produce institutional survival. International Harvester had more of both than any other American farm equipment company in the post-war era. More history, more dealers, more production capacity, more recognition in rural America than any brand except Deere. It did not survive the intersection of a labor crisis, a credit crisis, and a commodity price collapse arriving within the same 36 months. J.I. Case survived because Tenneco had the financial structure to absorb losses that no standalone machinery company could carry. The merger that created Case IH was not a story of American industrial strength. It was a story of American industrial fragility, of what happens when the machine that feeds a country is built by a company whose balance sheet cannot outlast a bad few years. What was preserved was not the company. It was the knowledge encoded in the machine, the axial flow rotor, the Magnum powertrain, the precision agriculture data architecture. These are the institutional products that carried the combined entity through the crisis and into the era of GPS-guided planting and variable rate fertilizer application that defines American production agriculture today. Somewhere on a farm in central Illinois, on a morning in October when the corn is ready and the weather window is closing, a Case IH axial flow combine, wearing the colors of two companies that no longer exist separately, carrying the name of a brand that is owned in Amsterdam and manufactured in Racine, moves into the edge of a 400-acre field at 4 miles per hour, the rotor spinning at 450 RPM, harvesting 200-bushel corn without plugging, the grain flowing clean into the tank, the yield monitor tracking every acre, the same architecture that an IH engineer in Hinsdale drew on a drafting table 60 years ago, still doing exactly what it was designed to do, on the same American ground, under the same American sky, feeding the same American country that Jerome Case and Cyrus McCormick began feeding, each in his own way, before the Civil War. See you in the next one.